Howdy YouTube, and welcome to this episode of Gunman. So today we've got a full respray on a Mazda CX-5. This color here is actually a candy color and the paint code is 46V. So it is actually a true candy, but what we do is we put a pink ground coat down first, and then we'll be putting 3 coats of the candy layer down. So as you can see there, all my prep work has been done. I decided not to use any sealer or wet on wet on the quarter panels and the roof of the car. There was a good reason for that, because I don't want to get any sealer inside those masking edges, specifically on the quarter panel, because the amount of coats of paint that I'm going to be putting on this job here, there's a good chance that you may not get any of your top coat color landing in there, or you could even get a little bit of a build up on those edges. And also the roof didn't need it because I did prime the entire roof. Now I'm using PPG Enviro base for this job here, and I've been quite impressed with the results that I've been getting from the PPG Enviro base. The first layer was, as I said before, the wet on wet primer, what is known as sealer in America. And I tell you what, I've been absolutely loving the PPG wet on wet primer. It is just amazing. It goes down so smooth and it dries really actually nice and fast. So, you know, 15 to 20 minutes on a smaller job, if you get the heat cranked right up in the booth, you can sort of maybe cheat that flash off time, maybe cut it down to like 15 minutes if you're in a real hurry. And I find that it doesn't pinch up either, and I think part of that is because it lays down so smooth. But anyway, moving right along. With this job here, we're going to be just showing a little bit of each stage. I'll be doing my best to talk you guys through the job. If I do forget anything, I do apologize. I don't script these videos. But yeah, so the next layer is the PPG Enviro base coat. So this is a waterborne base coat system, and I think I've found a really good way of spraying this stuff here. And I actually am new to this system. I asked a lot of people on Instagram and they were just an absolute wealth of knowledge. I had lots of people giving me lots of different pointers, but I landed on this one here. So I tried what loads of different people told me, and I landed on this method here. So what you'll notice, I'm putting this first coat of base coat down really wet. So I have the fluid fully open. So what I mean by fully open is you'll pull the trigger, so without any paint in the gun, obviously, without it even plugged up, no paint in the pot. Just pull the trigger and then start winding the fluid in until you start feeling it pinch, and to push your hand forward on the trigger, right? So that means you're still at full fluid, but you're just starting to get a little bit of resistance out of it. And that's for your first coat. Full fan also. The spray gun is the DeVilbiss GTI Pro Lite, 1.3mm fluid tip, and T20 air cap. So full fan, as I said, well, you can actually come in half a turn if you need. But then for your second coat, I'll wind the fluid in half a turn, and for the third coat, I'll wind it in another half of a turn. And each coat, I will also be dropping the pressure by 5 psi. Now what you notice here is I was getting this sort of a silicone or fisheye reaction. This happened for like a week or two, and then it just stopped happening. So it was a weird thing that was happening, because it wasn't happening on everything. It would never do it if I didn't put the wet on wet down. So I'm not blaming the wet on wet, don't get me wrong, I do love it, as I said before, but it would only happen like that fisheye reaction would only happen where I put my wet on wet. So it wouldn't happen over the areas that, let's just say I've done a panel, sanded it down and put the base coat straight over it. It would never happen, but it would only happen where I put the wet on wet. It would also only happen on panels off the car. So original panels off the car. I never had it on any brand new panels. So for whatever reason, there was some kind of a contaminant that was actually finding its way through the wet on wet, but not reacting with the wet on wet, but it was reacting with the PPG Enviro base. So as I say, a bit of a strange thing that was happening. Now, as of recording this video, I did this probably about a month or two ago. I'm not getting that issue anymore. So, I mean, it's just something that happened. I'm glad it went away. I'm glad I'm not getting it anymore. But I actually didn't get to the bottom of it. I don't know exactly what it was that was causing those fisheye effects. I did all the things that you could think of in obviously giving the panels an extra wipe down. I would always wipe them down with waterborne cleaner, and then also the solvent cleaner being Prepsol or wax and grease remover. So I'd get the panels really nice and clean. So I thought I was ticking all the boxes, but either way, as I said, it stopped happening now, and that is the main thing. So as I said before, with the base coat application, we leave it, come in half a turn with the fan, but you don't absolutely have to do that. You can leave it at full fan. And then every single coat, we wind that fluid in half a turn, and I drop the pressure by 5 psi. So starting at 25 psi, you will end up at 15 psi. Now I have actually tweaked that a little bit and changed those settings slightly. I've actually found that just a little bit above 15 psi works fine for most colors, but the ultra coarse metallics does actually like that 15 psi for the last coat. But yeah, so you're going to be putting less on per coat each coat as well. So obviously you have turned that fluid in, and per each coat you're not going for coverage. So you've kind of, with your first coat, you probably noticed I just smashed it on really heavy, so it was full fluid and just smashed it on. I wanted to get like 80 to 90% coverage in that first coat. Now with your second coat, the idea of that one is to get your full coverage. So you still need a fair amount of fluid coming out, but you are sort of stepping it down a little bit, because yeah, if you put this stuff on too wet, you're not going to get the right effect with the metallic. That's what I've found. So by going on lighter each coat, you're actually improving the effect of the metallic, and then you will also remove any mottle. That's what I've found. Now, is this the only way to spray this stuff? No. Is it even the recommended way to spray it? No, not the guys here in Australia, like not the PPG reps here in Australia. That's not what they tell me to do. They do actually tell me to do it slightly different, but this way works for me. It works an absolute treat. I find it nice and fast. And yeah, 3 passes is all I want to do. Like, I don't want to be going and doing 5 or 6 passes every single time I need to get some base coat down. So yeah, especially on jobs like this, on resprays, if you've got to do it the ways that they told me to do it, the ways that one of the reps told me to do it here in Australia, it would take a lot longer to do it. They were basically doing like a double visit per coat. So they would go bottom to top, then top to bottom per coat. So you'd be covering the panel twice every single coat, especially when you can get these kind of results doing it this way. So now if you were unhappy with it after your 3 coats, leave those settings at that 3rd pass setting. So as I said, you'll start at 25, you'll go down to 20, then 15. If you're still not quite happy with it after that 3rd coat, leave the settings the same, because you don't want to go too low. You don't want to end up at 10 psi. It's just not going to be atomizing properly. And if you go in too far with the fluid also, I've found that the metallic starts going too sparkly, because it's just, you're actually not getting enough on. So as I say, you don't want too much on with this, but also on the other hand, like, you still need a certain amount on there, because it can go too sparkly if you're not getting enough out. That's what I found. Like, when the PPG reps came out with me, like the way he sprayed it, or he had me spraying it at least, I found the colors went way too sparkly. So because I think he had his fluid in it like 1.5 turns out, and yeah, you're just not getting enough material on, if you ask me. So it's making all the metallic particles just land on there and like stand up too much, like they're not actually sort of laying down the way they're meant to. As I say, like, all due respect to him, no doubt his method works for him, and if he's happy with the results, I really couldn't care less, to be honest. One other thing I would actually like to mention is that I only do the edges on my first coat. So I've found that very first coat, the one that we put down really wet, that, as I said, that gets you 80 or 90% covered anyway, and most of the time the edges, they've already got the right color anyway, so you don't have to go for full coverage, because they're already like covered anyway. So yeah, as I say, by the time you put your wet on wet down, your 3 coats of base coat, and in this instance 3 coats of candy, and then 1 more coat of clear, that's going to be a lot of build up of material on all of those edges. So yeah, as I said to the guys when this job came out of the booth, I said, look, half of the battle is getting neat edges. You can have the best, flattest paint job, but if you've got big, daggy edges all over the door openings, then to me, that's a messy job. That's the kind of job that I, as a painter, when I'm trying to figure out if a car's been painted before, I guess the first thing you look for is orange peel, runs, D-nibs, but then you'll open your doors up and you'll have a look at those edges. So it is like a bit of a telltale sign. So as I say, yeah, getting those nice neat edges, I think that can be, to me, you know, the difference between a good job and a bit of a messy job. And same thing with this candy coat that I'm doing. I'm only doing one coat of candy on the edges. I've found it's all that it needs, and yeah, there's just no need to go 3 full coats of candy on all of those edges, because one coat is, to me, it's enough to change the color to make the effect look right, but as I say, without having an overload of products. And yeah, I will put my coat of clear over the edges, so we do end up with 2 coats of clear on the edges. But once you start going 4 coats of clear on your edges, you're gonna get some pretty big, messy build-ups. So what I'm doing in between coats of this is, as I said, we're going 3 coats of candy and then 1 coat of standard clear with no candy in it. And between coats, I'm going 20 minutes per coat. So first coat of candy, leave it 20 minutes. Second coat of candy, 20 minutes. Third coat of candy, leave it 20 minutes, but then I gave it a bake. So I gave it a low bake at, I think it was like 45 degrees for 20 minutes. I then let the booth cool down, let the panels cool back down a little bit. Now what you need to do, and what you do need to be careful of, is that because we baked it, you don't want to go in there too soon while the panels are still hot, and you don't want to bake it for too long either, and you don't want to bake it too hot either. So as I said, I've been going like 45 degrees, not going above 45 degrees for that bake. And as you can see here, I'm testing on that masking to see if it's still tacky, because if it's too long, well, your clear's just not going to stick. I mean, yeah, if you sprayed this the night before and then you went in the next morning and put a coat of clear over it, there's no way that clear coat's going to stick, because you're not going to get that chemical adhesion, because it's not going to be sticky enough, I guess. So yeah, you do have to be pretty switched on, and I wouldn't recommend your first job of spraying this color this way being a full respray, because there's a good chance that you could make a bit of a mess out of it. You could get your flash off times wrong, and so that's actually what happened with me. So they do a few of these jobs here for Mazda at this workshop I've just started at, and it turns out that there was another one of these jobs, but it was a smaller job, right? So it was like a hit in the back end. I actually did a video on that, so you've probably already seen it. But with that job, I actually kind of muffed up the bake time. I baked it too hot and I baked it for too long. So what ended up happening, I went in there after the bake and I got scared. I got scared that if I didn't clear it now, I was going to go outside of that window of getting your adhesion. So that's why I just had to get a coat of clear on while it was still warm. But being that the booth was, or the booth and the panels were still so warm, I couldn't lay the clear down nicely, so it was all orange peely and dry, and it looked terrible. As it ended up, I actually had to repaint that job. I just sanded it all down and I re-cleared it and it came up fine. But yeah, as I say, just be very careful. If you do ever do it this way, lower bake is better, shorter and lower bake, so I wouldn't recommend going any longer than 25 minutes, but even little things like the hardeners you're using, the clear coats you're using, these will all play a part in how long you have to wait in between coats and how long you have to bake it for and all those kind of things. If you're using like a sprint clear, like an ultra fast clear, you may not even need the bake. So the clear coat that I did use is the LVC 136 with the 320 hardener and the 420 reducer. So the 420 reducer is the medium reducer. And look, as you can see there, it's a pretty nice result. It probably looks like they should look like from factory, because we all know that Mazda don't really put enough paint on their cars. I've never actually got a micrometer onto it, but as you can see here, it's definitely a lot thicker than what the Mazda factory put on. So I think part of the reason why this shop here do take the doors off is that they were getting like sausages or window framing effect around all of their doors, and they just like, they've done a few of these jobs here, right? And they've sort of refined their procedure. So I just came into this shop relatively recently, and they've just decided that they're best doing the doors off the car, but at the same time as the car, as to not get any color difference. But as I say, like if they had the doors on the car, they found that they were getting some window framing where the candy would build up and you would have like a bit of a thick edge around the edges. So yeah, they found this is the best way. I think it's a pretty solid way of doing it. And if you're wondering how long a job like this took me to do, that's just the paint work. So prep and paint, not including any polishing. It was 2.5 days. So actually on the day prior to that, I did spend like an hour or two. I got the roof into primer. I put some sandable primer on the roof because there was actually a couple of rust spots. So some of the stone chips had gone down so deep that they'd actually created rust. So I got my little grinder onto them, ground them out, and then 2-pack primed the entire roof to seal it down. Then the following day, it was basically just a sand down, fill up all the chips, and then masked it up. And then the day after that, I came in and painted it. And I had actually the paint work done by lunchtime. So just to paint, just to do the application on what we've seen for most of this video, on the body itself, that was half a day's work. I then spent the rest of that day prepping up all the panels that you see here. So the tailgate, bonnet, bumpers, and all the small trims and parts and door handles and stuff like that. And then the final day, which was the half day, was painting them. So yeah, I reckon that was a pretty good turnaround. But to be fair, there's probably just as much, if not more, work involved in doing the polishing and the remove and refit on these jobs. But it's definitely fun to have a bigger job to be able to sink your teeth into, but also not be stuck on for weeks and weeks. I do like doing resprays, but sometimes doing that restoration work, which I was doing when I had my own workshop, can get a little bit tedious and time consuming. So yeah, it's good to have a respray to do where the car's in actually pretty good condition, and as obviously all the parts have been taken off by someone else, because I don't really get much kick out of a remove and refit. But there you go, that's the job all finished off, and I reckon it came up pretty damn good. Now they've got themselves a paint job that's gonna last for quite some time, with that 4 coats of ultra high solid PPG clear coat. So be sure to subscribe if you're not already, hit the big thumbs up. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Gunman out. I'd like to say a big thanks to everyone for watching, and if you'd like to support the channel further, you're more than welcome to go over and check out some of the merchandise we've got. My personal favourite is those spray suits, so they're a good quality Colad branded spray suit with a Gunman logo on it. There's also hats, drink coolers, hoodies and t-shirts, so be sure to go over and check out the link in the description if you are interested.